They never expected the quiet distance to carry such weight. But ever since you detached, an invisible current has been pulling their world apart. The same hands that once tried to hold power over your spirit are now locked in chaos, turning on each other with accusations sharper than knives. No announcement was made, no warning given. Just a silent transformation that sent tremors through everything they tried to hide. And now, the ground beneath them no longer holds. The balance shifted when your presence no longer fed their illusions. You didn't retreat with bitterness. You evolved with intention. And with every step into your true rhythm, the things that once fed on your stillness began to collapse. No more disguises to decode. No more twisted energies to endure. The space around you grew cleaner, lighter, quieter. The very absence of your energy is now echoing in rooms you haven't entered in weeks. What they built wasn't sustainable. It was parasitic. And when the host heals, the parasites perish. Their structures depended on a light they never learned to generate themselves. Now that light is gone, and their hands are empty. They tried to anchor their survival in your sacrifice. But you were never theirs to control. And as your awareness returned to its rightful home, their blueprint fell apart. Some people don't show up to connect, they show up to collect. What looked like coincidence was actually orchestration. A carefully placed figure emerged, not by chance, but by calculated strategy. They weren't there to support you, they were there to mimic safety, an engineered comfort designed to disguise an ambush. Smiles rehearsed. Gestures programmed. Words selected for impact. The goal was never to befriend you. It was to fracture you from the inside out. You are here for a reason. If you feel the call, answer it. Click Join to unlock exclusive content, deep insights, and a powerful community. This isn't just a membership, it's an awakening. Step into your divine purpose. Join the chosen. They approached like clockwork, right when your inner world started expanding. Not loud, not aggressive. Polished, soft-spoken, surgically precise. They asked the kinds of questions that made your instincts tense, the kind that dug too deep too soon. Their timing was always eerily perfect, arriving in your life just as you were building strength. Their presence seemed gentle, but their purpose was corrosive, to blur your intuition, distort your clarity, and destabilize your growth from beneath the surface. The strategy was advanced. This wasn't clumsy interference, it was a long play designed to look natural. And when you sensed that misalignment, that inner hum of warning, you weren't imagining things. Your core was intercepting an invisible script, a performance not meant for your benefit but for your dismantling. As you kept evolving, someone nearby was digging. What they unearthed wasn't truth, it was fabrication. Documents reshaped, identities manipulated, stories built from digital smoke. Not because of who you were publicly, but because of what you were becoming privately. Sometimes the only reason a tower collapses is because someone inside finally lights a match. A fracture from within has turned their hidden empire into a battlefield. One of their own, once quiet, once complicit, couldn't carry the weight anymore and decided to break the silence. What was uncovered wasn't just mischief or minor deception, but a full-scale fabrication machine with international branches and deeply entangled objectives. Layers of false lives, carefully designed aliases, and digital shadows began to surface. Travel plans under names that never legally existed. Financial channels built to mirror yours. A sinister possibility emerged. Were they preparing to impersonate you entirely? Access what was sacred? Claim what was never theirs to touch? The one who cracked under the pressure isn't just holding secrets, he's holding leverage. He knows the roles, the sequence, the buried evidence. And now the walls are closing in on the architects who thought they'd never be seen. That's why the structure is shaking. That's why their circle is breaking. The very person who once stood closest to your heart is now trapped in the blueprint they helped carry out. What began as romance mutated into recruitment, and now they're trying to undo what they set in motion. Their voice trembles with regret, but the ones pulling strings don't care about remorse. They're tightening the grip, reminding them of every moment before you turned inward and awakened. Not out of justice, but out of fear. Fear of the exposure that now feels inevitable. If you've been touched by God's goodness, don't keep it to yourself. Click Super Thank You, and sow a gift of $20 or more to help spread His light. Your giving becomes a ripple of grace, blessing hearts and building His kingdom. Let His overflow pour through you. There's a silence now that terrifies them, not because it's empty, but because it's unreachable. You're no longer orbiting the same emotional landscape. What they once mistook as a phase has turned out to be permanent departure. They imagined they could walk both corridors, one leading to betrayal, the other back to you. But the bridge between them collapsed the moment you stopped looking back. They operated under the illusion that access would always be theirs. That proximity, charm, or shared memories could grant them continued influence. But something irreversible shifted. Their usual tricks don't land. Their words don't bend your spirit. Their presence doesn't register. What they're beginning to grasp is that you're now calibrated to a rhythm they cannot fake, mimic, or intercept. And that realization cuts deeper than any rejection. Now they stand in a tightening grip of consequence, caught between allegiance to an agenda that's falling apart and the glaring truth that you've ascended far beyond their control. If they stay, they lose the one person who ever saw their potential. If they break away, they become a target of the very system they helped construct. Either way, they're locked out of the world you've built, a world they never truly understood. Only those who've sat in silence with their own pain can recognize truth when it finally speaks. This space wasn't built for pretense, it was built for transformation. It's where people gather not to dwell in bitterness, but to extract meaning from the wreckage. Where battle scars become roadmaps and intuition is sharpened by every betrayal endured. What others call overthinking, we call pattern recognition. What others avoid, we confront. We don't seek revenge, we seek clarity. And through that clarity, we build unshakable peace. There's a growing trend of mimicry, but imitation never holds the same frequency as authenticity. Someone from your past, once dismissive of your path, is now suddenly fluent in your language, echoing your mantras, quoting your beliefs, parading borrowed wisdom like it was self-earned. But those who've actually done the work can feel the hollowness in their tone. They didn't transform, they copied. They didn't heal, they rehearsed. Spirituality isn't a performance for attention. It's a reckoning. And shortcuts don't exist, you're not here by chance. Feel the pull? Tap Join to unlock truth, purpose, and a tribe that gets it. This is more than a membership, it's your calling. They'll post the phrases. They'll echo the rhythm. They'll decorate themselves in borrowed light. But what's missing is the actual process. The breaking, the sitting with shame, the rebuilding from scratch. True growth doesn't come from wearing someone else's wisdom like a costume. It comes from standing naked in front of your own reflection and telling the truth, even when it burns. And that's why their act is see-through to anyone who's actually walked the fire. There are those who mimic light not to honor it, but to manipulate it. They rehearse sincerity like a stage role, hoping their scripted transformation will reopen a door that no longer exists. They bank on the idea that your compassion will eclipse your inner knowing, that your hope for their growth will override the evidence of their illusion. But it doesn't. Their gestures, though carefully choreographed, fall flat against the wall of your discernment. You've outgrown the frequency where their games once worked. They assumed that borrowing your language would disguise their true intent, that repeating your affirmations would grant them access. But each borrowed phrase echoes hollow. The emotional mimicry is transparent. Their staged awakening isn't evolution, it's desperation dressed in borrowed robes. Every forced attempt to bend your will rebounds like a slingshot, striking them with the very distortion they tried to impose. The tension builds as they realize you're immune to their tactics. And the more they try, the more the illusion fractures. Their obsession turns on them, consuming their focus, draining their energy. They whisper your name, not out of reverence, but regret. What was meant to enslave you now holds them hostage. The mental loops they designed for you now trap their own mind. Their efforts to trigger emotional collapse now birth emotional chaos in their own chest. And as they reach for darker methods, aiming to destabilize what you've rebuilt, they collide with consequences far beyond their understanding. The laws of spirit offer no sanctuary to those who weaponize love. What they sent out has returned, multiplied, and it's only just begun. Some battles aren't loud, they're invisible, quiet, and aimed at your core. Not out of anger, but out of a calculated desire to erase you. What's happening now isn't petty jealousy or emotional spite. It's targeted interference. Coordinated efforts to sabotage your very heartbeat, not through metaphor, but with focused intention meant to stop your body from carrying your spirit any further. The kind of malevolence it takes to try and snuff out life through unseen channels reveals exactly what level of darkness has been operating behind the curtain. But this isn't just physical. They've shifted tactics to strike your emotional center, hoping that despair will pull you back within their reach. They want collapse, not just of the body, but of your will. Panic you didn't invite. Grief you didn't earn. Fatigue that seems to rise out of nowhere. These are signals, not symptoms. A reminder that your light is under siege, but also that it's strong enough to repel every wave they send. Their plan relies on you mistaking their interference for your own feelings. But your awareness severs the connection every time. This campaign stretches wider than it first appeared. It's not just ex-lovers or distant adversaries. It's the people whose faces wore familiarity, who wrapped control in kindness, who used tradition as a leash and guilt as a collar. They leveraged shared bloodlines as a means to suppress your growth, keeping ancient dysfunction alive through manipulation disguised as love. But this time, the chain broke. You refused the script. And now, the system that relied on your silence is starting to unravel. Family, friends, extended ties, even those who once offered help, all were pieces of a larger strategy. Their roles were subtle but intentional: to extract, to report, to undermine. What they didn't expect was your refusal to reenact their generational choreography. And now, the system that once fed on your compliance is eating itself. The hierarchy crumbles. The alliances dissolve. What they built on secrecy is collapsing under the weight of its own rot. This isn't just your freedom. It's the beginning of their undoing. Nothing fractures faster than an alliance built on fear and deception. What once moved in silent coordination has erupted into a mess of conflicting threats and desperate power plays. The very hands that once worked together in secrecy are now clawing at each other's throats, each trying to be the first to escape blame. Their old tactics, once directed at you, are now recycled and fired inward. The circle that conspired in unity is now devouring itself in chaos. While they spiral, you remain untouched, far removed from the fallout, anchored in peace, aligned with purpose. From your elevated vantage point, you witness the unraveling. Each secret they tried to bury is now being dangled like currency. Whispers of infidelity. Records of concealed finances. Paper trails they thought were hidden now used as bargaining chips in a crumbling empire. Loyalty turned transactional. Trust turned weaponized. Those who were once tasked with orchestrating from behind the scenes are now being cornered by the very people they manipulated. One begins leaking receipts. Another starts recording calls. Someone else begins compiling documentation that shows the full map of their operation. Intimidation, forged records, shadow monitoring, coordinated financial schemes. What they once labeled harmless games now carry legal weight. And the longer they deny it, the louder the evidence grows. This isn't spiritual conflict anymore, it's criminal exposure. And the reckoning has only just begun. There comes a moment when silence can no longer contain truth, and that moment is approaching fast. Hidden layers are beginning to surface, not through whispers or assumptions, but through hard evidence and official intervention. A series of audio recordings, digital trails, and financial logs have begun painting a full picture of the operation behind your targeting. And it's bigger than you imagined. The exposure isn't symbolic, it's legal. What was once shadow play is now under the scrutiny of investigative eyes, and the fallout is already underway. Multiple branches of enforcement are connecting the dots. Cross-border schemes, identity tampering, coordinated emotional sabotage. The informant embedded in their ranks was more than a bystander. They were gathering the kind of evidence that can dismantle entire systems. This wasn't a one-time vendetta. It was a repeat blueprint, recycled across unsuspecting victims. You were supposed to be another name on their list. But the script broke the moment it met your light. An unexpected fracture formed when one of their own started shifting. A figure they planted in your orbit for disruption began to falter, caught off guard by something they weren't trained to resist. Your energy. Not your words, not your story, your presence. It started pulling them toward clarity, toward regret, toward a longing they couldn't explain. They deviated. They questioned the assignment. And now, the very ones who hired them are issuing threats to contain the defection. This operative, once a paid participant, now struggles with the guilt of their own involvement. They were sold a story. What they found was a soul. And that truth shook them. Now they walk a razor's edge, risking exposure, retaliation, and everything they once believed, just to try and undo what was set in motion. When truth finally catches up, it rarely arrives gently. It crashes through every illusion someone tried to maintain. And now, one of the central players in your past is unraveling. The weight of what they helped orchestrate is closing in, and they've launched into a frenzy of emotional confessions. They want to reveal every detail, every tactic, every hidden agenda they played a part in. The one who once smiled in your face while aligning with forces meant to destroy you is now desperate for some kind of redemption. They claim they were misled, that they were manipulated too, that they didn't fully understand what they were doing until it was too late. They want to name names, identify the architect behind the curtain, offer you their version of truth in exchange for a second chance. But what they fail to realize is that the opportunity for repair dissolved the moment they became active participants. It's not about timing anymore, it's about trust, and theirs has been permanently shattered. Their voice shakes with regret, but the foundation of their apology is built on self-preservation. It's not about your healing, it's about their panic. They see what's coming. The investigations. The exposure. The consequences. And they think that switching sides now will shield them. They offer declarations of change, empty oaths of spiritual rebirth, and promises to cut all ties with the network that recruited them. But your intuition sees through it. Their urgency isn't driven by remorse. It's driven by fear of accountability. They misunderstood who you've become. You no longer entertain the performance. You require proof, sustained, consistent transformation rooted in action, not speeches. Their confessions, though explosive, do not erase their betrayal. They want you to believe that revealing the blueprint behind the destruction makes them an ally again. But you remember the blueprint only exists because they helped draw it. And now, while they scramble for mercy, the structures they clung to are being dismantled by forces beyond their control. Authorities are stepping in, and the games they played in secret are becoming very public. Their chapter in your story is closing, not with reconciliation, but with exposure. There are moments when divine timing and human justice intersect, and this is one of them. Evidence long hidden beneath layers of deception is now surfacing in a precise and strategic wave. Coordinated efforts across regions are being activated, with files, devices, properties, and networks all coming under scrutiny. Quiet investigations are turning into rapid mobilization, and multiple individuals tied to the operation are facing synchronized action. The case has grown far beyond the assumptions of its creators, unfolding across borders, timelines, and digital trails. What you were intuitively shielded from is now being handled by hands that carry legal weight. Long before danger ever made it to your doorstep, your frequency rerouted your path. While chaos brewed behind the scenes, you were gently guided out of reach. Some of the darkest intentions never reached their destination, not because they weren't sent, but because your elevation refused delivery. Investigators are now tracing every movement. Names are being added to lists. Records are being frozen. Patterns are being dismantled. And through it all, you're being kept distant and safe, deliberately protected from the emotional impact of details you no longer need to carry. Meanwhile, someone from the wreckage is reaching toward you with a hand full of regret and a heart still dripping in denial. They're hoping proximity to truth will count as growth. That revealing pieces of the puzzle will earn them another invitation. But their apologies arrive wrapped in expectation. They don't want to heal, they want you to do it for them. Their words come laced with romanticism, not reform. They long to be guided back to grace, but they offer none of the inner work that transformation demands. You decline, not out of coldness, but clarity. You've learned that some wounds require solitude to heal, that some people confuse love with access. You do not entertain hollow repentance. You do not carry people through lessons they were meant to walk alone. The chapter is closed, not from hate, but from understanding that trust, once shattered by conspiracy, cannot be pieced back together with borrowed sincerity. The path ahead belongs to those who walk it unassisted. There is a silence that arrives only after the storm has destroyed itself, and that silence is now yours. While their tangled web collapses under the weight of its own deceit, you remain untouched, unmoved, unreachable. The collapse isn't sudden, it's slow and pitiful, playing out in full view while you stand rooted in an entirely different realm. Their chaos tries to echo, but it doesn't find you. You've grown beyond the reach of their frequency. They scream inside a room you no longer inhabit. The narratives they once controlled have lost all meaning. The games they played crumble without your energy to sustain them. The emotional traps, the spiritual interference, the theatrical power moves, they spiral in closed circuits now, bouncing off the very people who invented them. The same tools that were sharpened in your direction have become dull from internal use. Their attacks loop back on themselves, and their conspiracies become their own undoing. What was once targeted toward you is now devouring its creators. What you've completed is more than a chapter. It's a cosmic initiation. You didn't just walk away. You outgrew the very soil they buried their roots in. You detached so completely that even your absence became a weapon of truth. You didn't need revenge. You needed restoration. And you achieved it, not by lowering your standard, but by raising your resonance. You live in a reality governed by clarity, not confusion. Intuition, not fear. Alignment, not approval. And in this new field, they simply do not exist. Your future doesn't require their name. Your peace doesn't acknowledge their presence. You're free, not because they let go, but because you finally did. There's a stillness now that feels like truth, unshaken, unmistakable, and earned. You've stepped into a space where the lessons have settled and the clarity is permanent. What once confused you now feels obvious. What once drained you now repels itself. The illusion of connection has no power here. This chapter opens with a new code embedded in your soul, You no longer ask whether someone values you. You already know your worth. And because of that, anything less than truth cannot stay near. Interactions have shifted. The masks fall quicker. The agendas reveal themselves sooner. Your intuition no longer whispers, it speaks clearly, and you trust it without hesitation. Connections that arise now feel clean, reciprocal, and aligned. You don't chase, energy finds you because you've become a force field of integrity. Where your heart was once tested, now it's tempered. Where your spirit once bent to accommodate others, now it remains centered, immovable, and sovereign. This transformation sharpened every part of you. Your perception cuts through performance. Your energy knows before your mind does. You walk with the quiet power of someone who's seen behind the curtain and refused to play the part. You no longer give explanations to be understood. You set boundaries and walk away. You no longer seek validation. You embody wholeness. And within that embodiment, you've learned one of the greatest spiritual truths. Energy doesn't lie. It reflects. It amplifies. It obeys the intention behind it. Whether it builds or destroys depends entirely on the consciousness guiding its direction. And now, your direction is divine. There is a kind of wisdom that can only come through fire, and now you carry it effortlessly. You've decoded one of the most dangerous illusions. That affection can be used as a leash. You've learned how language dressed in warmth can still be wielded like a chain, and how not all soft hands carry safe intentions. What once confused you is now clear. Emotional leverage disguised as devotion no longer finds entry. You don't question the energy anymore. You read it, and you trust what you find. Your gifts have expanded in silence. They don't shout for attention. They respond only to truth. That quiet knowing inside you is now a force field. The moment something attempts to attach itself through guilt, false loyalty, or energetic coercion, your spiritual immunity kicks in with precision. You've seen how power becomes unstable when misused. And you've seen what happens when people try to mix light with control. It burns them first. They can't keep it up. Not indefinitely. Every misdirected action eventually folds under the weight of its own contradiction. And the universe makes sure of that. You've stepped into a chapter where alignment isn't a goal, it's your baseline. Energy that arrives now must enhance, not extract. Connection must uplift, not confuse. And in this new atmosphere, everything false malfunctions quickly. There's no more explaining your worth. No more proving your value. You've stopped entertaining chaos, not out of resentment, but because it's simply irrelevant. You carry elevation as your natural state, and elevation is incompatible with dysfunction. That's the irony. They spent so much time trying to bring you down, not realizing your refusal to engage was the very thing lifting you beyond reach. Let them spin. Let them self-destruct. You're no longer part of that storyline. The real victory isn't just survival, it's ascension. Your commitment to truth became your shield. Your silence became your power. And the same awakening they tried to destroy became the foundation of your invincibility. The road ahead isn't just clear, it's infinite. You've outgrown the war, surpassed the game, and dissolved the illusion. This is mastery. This is peace. This is freedom. And it's only the beginning.